2020 is certainly one of the worst years in my life, and I'm sure in many of your guys' lives. It's terrible. So we're all still reeling from the sudden and unexpected death of Michael Brooks. There's, there were shockwaves that went through the entire lefty political commentator world, but just left circles in general. Now, I want to do something to honor Michael Brooks' legacy. I'll discuss that a little more as I ramble on here, and forgive me for being all over the place, but, these are not the easiest things in the world to discuss. Now, Corn and I, on our podcast yesterday, we discussed Michael Brooks quite a bit. I told some stories as to, the times that I had hung out with him. Spoke a little bit about him personally, spoke a little bit about, life in general in the wake of a tragedy like this. How do you put things in context and perspective? How do you get your mind around stuff like this? So we touched on all that stuff in the podcast. And, this is stuff. How much more of this can we take with tragedy after tragedy? And, 2020, Trump almost started World War III by assassinating a top Iranian general. Kobe Bryant died. Obviously, you have the depression that we have now. We have COVID-19 and the pandemic that's taken 144,000 lives as of the recording of this segment. You have Bernie's campaign being just totally obliterated at the last moment when the establishment threw a Hail Mary pass and it worked. Just so much, just repeatedly, we've been slapped in the face and had our eyes spit in. And, I'm reminded of an old saying that I heard once, and I actually thought it was pretty poignant, even though it sounds a little silly. But somebody once said, if things are going good, don't worry, they're going to go bad. If things are going bad, don't worry, they're going to go good. And that's just, a pithy way of trying to say that this is life, man. And we're all on the ride together, and we're going to have our ups, we're going to have our downs. And right now, we just happen to be in a period of a prolonged downturn. And something like this hitting very close to home is perhaps as devastating a feeling as it can possibly get. Now, Michael and I, ideologically, we were 85 to 90% in agreement. I mean, his ideology and my ideology, it's very similar. But where we disagreed with each other, it was genuinely interesting and fruitful. And that's really all you can ask for in this world. I don't want everybody out there to be a clone of me and all of my beliefs and ideas. That wouldn't be fun or interesting at all. And Michael, while we had so many areas of strong agreement, wherever we disagreed, that was the most fun. That was the most interesting. And you never got a sense from him that he was, when he disagreed with you, he was condescending, he was looking down on you, he felt superior. No, he really wanted to, dive into the discussion and the arguments and dissect them and try to understand your viewpoint before he responds to it. And most importantly, when you spoke to him, you knew immediately this is a guy who has thought about this stuff quite a bit. This isn't a guy who's just shooting from the hip here with the first thing that pops in his mind when talking about an issue. Whatever the issue may be, he's read about it, he's contemplated it, and he has a very well thought out position on it. And he would classify, his beliefs and what he's fighting for as a sort of international socialist vision. And Michael was crystal clear that he believed that working people in Brazil, in Peru, in New Zealand, in Russia, in China, working people everywhere have a connection and share a common humanity. And in some ways, his obsession with focusing on people all over the world, that really is a sign that he's more optimistic than most people I know, because he dares to dream big to create, this massive world-encompassing vision where we all move forward together. And also, it's one of the most humanist perspectives I could think of. To really have that same level of concern with like a worker in Cambodia, that's unique and special, even in left-wing circles. So, the areas where we disagree, Michael and I always felt like those disagreements actually stemmed from him being a more optimistic and perhaps a more optimistic person than me and having a bigger vision than me. So, like, for example, he thought that there was a long-term goal of getting away from having borders and creating a truly, truly global community. And I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think we need borders just for the sake of organization. And I don't think that they're inherently evil, wrong, bad, bigoted, or anything like that. But at its core, I think the reason why I don't have as grand a vision as he does is because I just have a little bit more pessimistic view of human nature than he does. But that's the point. The point is, I think Michael had this belief, among others, because he really does see the good in everybody. And so he permits himself that ability to have that grand, world-encompassing vision for a sort of international socialist utopia in the future, because that goodness that he sees in everybody else, first and foremost, it's reflected in him. Because he truly is a guy who would give you the shirt off his back and would absolutely help you in a moment of need. And in some ways, I do think that perhaps, the ideological disagreements him and I do have and did have, it really did stem from him perhaps just being a more open person than me, a better person than me, a more outgoing and accepting person than I am. I'm definitely more guarded. I'm definitely a little more pessimistic than optimistic in some ways. And those really amazing things about human beings and human nature, he had them in him, which allowed him to see it in everybody else. So I think that I don't want his ideology, his philosophy, his legacy to just slowly but surely erode. So what I want to do to honor his vision, at the very least do my part to try to keep his message alive and get it out there, is I want to re-upload a lot of my favorite talks with him. So I had been on his show a number of times, and like I said, I really enjoyed our conversations because where we disagreed, it was always productive and fruitful and interesting. So I do want to, re-upload a lot of the talks I had with him over the coming week or so. And I hope you guys will watch and, really take note of his perspective and his ideology. Because again, wherever him and I do disagree, I think the core of it stems from him being more optimistic about human beings in general than me. And Michael has that grander vision and that all-encompassing philosophy and that hope and optimism for the future, which is something that he elucidated brilliantly, and I don't want that to go away. And I think that if you talk to Michael, he would say, it's not about me. He would say that. He would say, listen, it's not about me. It's about these issues, and it's about improving the world for people, and it's about building institutions that will last and will endure and will provide people with the material well-being that they need and will empower workers moving forward. So, even where we disagree, to me, I just find it interesting and fruitful, and I do not want his perspective, his ideology, his unique perspective and ideology, and thoughtful perspective and ideology. I don't want that to just go away. So I want to do whatever I can to, help that move forward and maybe inspire the next Michael Brooks. Because again, I really do think Michael would say, hey man, it's not really about me. It's about this vision, this ideology, the kind of future we can create. And so I want to, re-upload some of my favorite talks with him on the channel. And, also I will probably try to take some of the things that he was most proud of and feature them as well, and maybe comment on them myself. Because, the one little piece of solace that we have is that it is true that he did kind of check a lot of the important things off of his bucket list recently. Whether it's interviewing Adolph Reed, interviewing Noam Chomsky, interviewing Cornel West, interviewing Lula. I mean, he wouldn't have believed it had you told him that, hey man, when you're gone, Lula is going to be a Michael Brooks bro, and he's going to tweet about you quite a bit. And the entire Brazilian left has come together to honor Michael because they know how much Michael cared for them and how much Michael cared for working people. And even though this is a really sad moment, that was a very beautiful thing to see. I don't think he knew how much he meant to so many people. And to see the giant outpouring of support really was incredible to me. And I'll tell you what, there are a lot of rifts and factions on the left, and we're not always united. And sometimes we're at each other's throats. But you know what? We're more united than I've ever seen in my life when it came to the reaction to this terrible tragedy that broke all of our hearts. And he was able to unite the left. He was able to get a tremendous outpouring of support for him and his message, and I think he would be proud of that. And again, I also think he would say, it's not about me, it's about we have to move forward and work to implement this vision. And so we can't let that go away. So I want to do whatever I can to try to aid in that. And again, I'll be re-uploading some of my favorite talks with him, as well as featuring some of the work that he would probably be most proud of himself that he did. And none of us can or should let his memory and his ideology die. Even though it hurts, we move forward and do the best that we can to honor his legacy by pushing for these same things.